a reorganization of inmates in a new maximum security facility. The BBC's David Bamford.
Trouble began at El Oro No. 1 detention centre in Mashala when at 3 in the morning on Sunday the authorities began transferring inmates to a new maximum security facility. The riot stemmed from gang opposition to the transfers, which they viewed as a threat to their drug operations. Prisoners first overpowered the guards. During the battle by police to regain control, 4 inmates were shot dead. A subsequent search revealed 27 inmates had died by asphyxiation, hanged with bedsheets in their cells.
Now recapping on your top stories, Guinea junta leader Mamadi Doumbouya and 8 other candidates have been approved to run in next month's presidential election. Doumbouya has vowed not to run when he sees power in the West African country in 2021. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nsinsi.
SABC News. The African perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, close to $5 million will be needed to implement VAR in South African football, while Elina Rybakina earned more than $5.2 million for winning the WTA finals. I'll tell you more at the bottom of the hour.
Connecting Africa to the world. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni brings you the latest insights on Africa's economy.
It is exactly 7 minutes after 4 p.m. A very good afternoon to you, Africa. A lot in store for you today, including developments around those negotiations between the IMF and Senegal. Didn't end off on a very positive note for either one of the parties. We'll get into the dynamics of the implications of that for Senegal, obviously in the backdrop of a no deal as far as a new facility is concerned. Also, we'll take a look at budget inflation in South Africa with the Minister of Finance, Enoch Godongwana. Possibly there is some speculation that he may be formally announcing a new inflation target at the upcoming medium-term budget policy statement. That's just some of what we've got in store for you this afternoon. As always, an open invitation for you to continue interacting with us on our various social media platforms. On X, Instagram and YouTube, you'll find us at Channel Africa 1, and on Facebook we are at Channel Africa.
The voice of the continent, now online, with all your sports fixtures, lifestyle and more.
We start off by taking a look at dynamics between Botswana and Angola. The mining ministers of both those countries recently met in Gaborone to discuss closer cooperation in the diamond industry. The talks come as the two southern African nations explore ways to jointly take control of De Beers, the diamond giant owned by Anglo-American. Botswana, which holds a 15% stake in De Beers and supplies around 70% of its rough diamonds, regards the company as a strategic national asset, even as falling global diamond prices continue to weigh on its economy. Channel Africa's economics reporter Innocent Simosa has more.
Angola, which initially expressed interest in acquiring a minority stake in De Beers, has now tabled a bid for a controlling share, a move that could spark a bidding contest with its neighbor. During a meeting briefly opened to the media, Botswana's Minister of Mines, Boholo Joy Kinewedu, and Angola's Minister of Mineral Resources, Petroleum and Gas, Diamantino Pedro Azevedo, discussed opportunities for cooperation in the diamond sector as well as in energy and logistics. Political economist Kevin Tutani shares economic implications for Southern Africa if Botswana and Angola gains control of De Beers, given the current global slump in diamond prices.
Well, I would say as Angola and Botswana, if they do manage to get control of De Beers, for Southern Africa, this obviously will most likely embolden the governments within the region, that they also have to ensure that they're diligent and take control of their destinies. You know, remember, when it comes to diamonds, with regards to Botswana, they determine 90% of, they actually make up 90% of Botswana's exports and are around 30% of GDP, you know, a sizable amount of government revenue as well. So it is quite sensible for the government of Botswana to want to get more involvement. I mean, it only has 15% stake in De Beers at the moment.
However, he maintains that control should be exercised through reasonable means.
But advisably, that determination to have greater control should be within reasonable means and not on the basis of senseless expropriation. Regarding to how it might affect investor confidence, within and regional cooperation in the mining sector. Well, investor confidence might be hampered, particularly if these countries, as Botswana and Angola, drive at their goal in a more of a violent manner.
Angola's Mines Ministry said in a statement that the two ministers discussed the interest of both countries in acquiring shares in the multinational De Beers, but did not provide more details. How might a potential bidding war between Botswana and Angola affect investor confidence and regional cooperation in the mining sector? Tutani explains.
Remember, if they want to have controlling stake in this company in De Beers, they have to do their best to expropriate with compensation. We really don't want to call it expropriation, particularly because when it comes to De Beers, we understand that De Beers is ready to do an initial public offering on the stock exchange. That's number one. And it's also willing to do a private placement by selling that majority stake without going the way of the stock market. So the management of De Beers has actually expressed intention to let go of this stock in a professional manner, such that there's no need for expropriation.
As Botswana and Angola weigh their next moves, the outcomes could reshape the balance of power in the global diamond trade and refine Africa's role in controlling its own mineral wealth. Whether collaboration or competition prevails, both nations are signaling a new era of assertiveness in the continent's resource economy. For Channel Africa News, I'm Innocent Samos in Johannesburg.
Le monde entier a les yeux rivés sur Johannesburg. Les dirigeants des plus grandes économies mondiales se réunissent pour prendre des décisions qui façonneront les nations, les marchés et l'avenir. Vous savez déjà que Channel Africa sera sur place pour vous proposer des débats, des analyses et des points de vue essentiels. Suivez le sommet du G20 les 22 et 23 novembre en direct de l'Afrique. Restez connectés sur Channel Africa. Mix Vibration sur Channel Africa.
Qu'est-ce qui vous a amené à dire ça? Est-ce que vous avez observé un certain nombre d'événements dans la vie? Est-ce que c'était par rapport à une expérience? Est-ce que vous avez rencontré des choses qui vous ont dit il faut de la patience, comme ça les choses vont venir au bon moment et le bon Dieu pourra peut-être me visiter?
Oui, c'était justement un conseil que le Seigneur m'a fait inspirer pour donner à son peuple, parce qu'il y a la plupart des gens, pendant que Dieu bénit les autres, ils pensent que Dieu les a oubliés, et pendant que Dieu ouvre pour les autres, ils pensent que peut-être Dieu n'a pas pu écouter leurs prières. Alors, ce n'est pas le cas. Alors, Dieu bénit tout un chacun de nous avec son temps. Donc, le temps de Dieu est toujours le meilleur dans la vie de tout un chacun de nous.
Mix Vibration, tous les dimanches de 18h à 19h, temps universel.
Stay ahead with Africa in Business, where Thami Ngubeni unpacks your go-to source for Africa's economic trends and development.
It is exactly 14 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time. Now, residents in South Africa's Mpumalanga province, that is a province with the largest number of coal-fired power stations, have expressed mixed opinions regarding the government's efforts to transition from coal to clean energy. South Africa is in the process of transitioning to cleaner energy. Some mines will be repurposed or adapted to meet the demand for minerals needed for renewable energy. And closed mines may be repurposed for new jobs, land restoration, as well as other projects. Michael Mdluli filed this report.
South Africa is a partner of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development countries and a member of the G20. It is committed to advancing policies that address climate change. These countries aim to eliminate the use of coal between 2030 and 2040 and transition to cleaner, more environmentally friendly energy sources. This transition will involve closing coal mines and decommissioning coal-fired power plants. benefits. However, some residents of Mpumalanga, where most of South Africa's coal mines and power stations are located, expressed concerns that this shift will lead to significant economic hardship.
As the people from Mpumalanga, as I stay in Mpumalanga, I don't think it's a good idea. Our people here, we depend more on the coal here, and a lot of people, bread and butters, are here in the coal. So in South Africa as a whole, yes, it is fine for the energy side because it's fast, I know, but a lot of people will be jobless.
The closure of that mine, those houses, most of them are now empty, dilapidated, vandalized, and local economy was somehow affected. Families, income, other kids their parents could not afford maybe to take them to school.
Others support the government's plan to shift away from coal. They say it will contribute to a healthier society.
I understand because most of the areas suffers from pollution, and that leads to health issues. Most of the people die based on those coal mining, and I think it should be done away.
The community now is not falling on sick always with lungs or TB, even children, even a small child now. If we are using the gas stove, it's better than before when we used coal stove number 7. The other things at the afternoon, evening also, on the morning also, there was many of a road dust of a stove.
Jobs remain the primary concerns for communities, especially those around the mines. A resident, Amos Nobela, urged G20 leaders to discuss plans to save and create jobs.
I think they should discuss more on job creation because that's the biggest issue that we're facing as a country. So they should have more ideas. We'll see, are they bringing solar, but then in there should be job creation.
President Cyril Ramaphosa established the Presidential Climate Commission in December 2020 to, among others, investigate and make recommendations on how the country can achieve a just energy transition. I am Michael Mdluli in Middelburg, Mpumalanga.
From markets to innovation, Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni covers it all. With Africa's future in focus, Channel Africa, the African perspective.
It is exactly 17 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time. Now, here's a story that we've been, throwing forward to for quite a while this afternoon. It's the International Monetary Fund. Well, they've completed their mission to Senegal, but without agreeing on a new lending program. This is after the West African country refused to restructure its debt, calling the move a disgrace. The international lender froze Senegal's previous $1.8 billion program last year. You will remember this after it was revealed that its new leaders did not disclose some of the hidden debts, which have since ballooned to more than $11 billion. For more on this, we joined on the line by Vince Musewe, an independent economist based in Zimbabwe. A very good afternoon to you, Vince. Good to have you with us on Africa in Business.
Hi, can you hear me? Because I can't hear you well.
Are you having problems hearing me?
Yeah, that's better. Just maybe, yeah.
Is this better? Okay, lovely. Well, let's start off with this, Vince. The Senegalese Prime Minister, Ousmane Sonko, has described the restructuring or the proposed restructuring of their debt as, I quote, a disgrace. Why is Senegal reluctant to restructure its debt? And this is given the very high levels of debt that they have.
Yeah, okay. If you look at the history of IMF, I mean, I can start at the beginning. The IMF has been in Africa, lending Africa since 1952. It has poured in tens of billions of dollars into Africa. In 1990s, the IMF came up with what they called an economic structural adjustment program, where they basically intervened in African economies, asking to liberalize. And this led to serious deindustrialization and very high levels of unemployment. Actually, Zimbabwe suffered significantly from that policy.
Vince, I do apologize. I'm going to ask if we can just go to a break so we can try and get you on a better line. You're sounding very muffled, and this is indeed a very important conversation for us to have. So if you could please indulge us, sir, we'll be back with you in just a moment and hopefully on a better line. We'll continue that conversation on the dynamics between the IMF and Senegal with Vince Musewe, who's an independent economist based in Zimbabwe. It's gone exactly 20 minutes after 4.
Ready to connect, innovate, and be inspired? It's all happening at Africa's Tech Festival, where Africa's technology meets the world. From the 10th to the 13th of November in Cape Town, join global leaders, investors, and innovators driving the future of Africa's digital economy. Don't miss the continent's biggest week in tech. Get your pass now at africatechfestival.com.
The sound of Africa is evolving. Experience our new mobile app. Free to download, free to connect.
It is still 20 minutes after 4 p.m. Actually, it's just gone 21 minutes. Let's see if we've got a better line for Vince Musewa as we continue focusing on the dynamics between the IMF and Senegal. So, Vince, if we could please just start once again as to why it is that Senegal is reluctant and why they viewed this proposal to have their debt restructured, why they view this as a disgrace.
Yeah, okay. Every time the IMF actually intervenes, it's not only intervening at structural level. In Zambia, they came and said, listen, there are various conditions in order to restructure this debt. One of them is the compensating white farmers. The other issue is actually governance and economic reforms. So I would understand Senegal being hesitant because what the IMF does, because you owe them a lot of money, they basically come and prescribe your policies. Now, your economic policies, where you should be spending money. They look at how the country is being run, and they begin to actually interfere in the running of the country on the back of being owed money. Right? So it leads to some sort of, and I can understand Senegal, because once they do that, they are basically beholden to the IMF. And that has been the problem with a lot of African countries where the IMF has poured in tens of billions of dollars since 1952, but those countries are still underdeveloped in the state. The other issue that Senegal, which is probably they're scared of, is that once you are restructuring, you don't get access to international capital markets. Because there is no more confidence to be lending you more money. It means that you are stuck when you need money offshore, as is in the case of Zimbabwe. So they're very hesitant to go the structural route because, number one, any debt you are taking out there will be more expensive because the risk perception of the country increases because you're restructuring. And once that money becomes more expensive, there's a direct impact on the economy because now you're borrowing heavily with heavy interest rates, right? And you still have to repay that, which means your revenues that you're getting as a country, most of them end up going to service a debt as opposed, for example, for public expenditure.
Does Senegal have any other options besides this formal restructuring? In other words, can they afford to dig their heels in?
Well, that is a big question because currently their debt is probably looking at 100% of GDP, which is huge. I think it's between 100 and 120% of GDP. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's huge. It's a huge responsibility. I doubt that they'll be able to afford to service this debt. What they can do is maybe don't go into full restructuring, but maybe just go into what they call reprofiling, where you look at the debt and you say, okay, how can we not restructure the debt, but reprofile in the sense that what are going to be the priorities to pay and how are you going to pay them and whatever. It's almost a mild form of restructuring. And I think that's the route they prefer instead of going to the full restructure. The issue of affordability is obviously out of the question because there's probably more hidden debt, which is a lot of cases with African countries, in that the debt that is being disclosed is not the full debt. So it will mean the IMF has to go and quantify the full debt of the country. And some countries don't want to do that because there's a lot of hidden debt. For example, there's a lot of Chinese hidden debt that has not been accounted for. Where China comes in and says, we'll build a bridge, but we'll give you a loan to build a bridge. And that loan is not taken into account when you're looking at the national debt. So there has to be transparency in actually quantifying the total loan, and some governments might not want that to happen.
Is there an existence of, and I guess I pretty much already know the answer to this, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, a public debt platform where all public debt is listed in order to try and avoid this quote-unquote hidden debt?
Yeah, you see, the issue has been corruption. Most governments, that are corrupt are doing some deals under the table, which something doing that list would actually expose a lot of dirt. And I don't think we are going to get there soon because, when technology is a powerful tool, but it requires accountability and transparency, right? And it basically means government has to open up its books to exactly what has been up to. And in a lot of instances where there's been corruption and where governments are not comfortable, with their popularity and stuff like that, they don't want that to be disclosed at all. So logically and theoretically for you and me, we want to know how much the country owes in total, right? But politically, it might not be palatable.
I mean, for consumers and for businesses, there are the credit platforms like the ITC, etc., which do gather all the information and show one's credit profile. Surely a similar instrument for countries would stand them in good stead. But I wonder, Senegal says that they plan to finance 90% of a recovery plan from domestic resources, and they want to do this in order to avoid additional debt. How realistic is a commitment to rely mainly on domestic financing in the short to medium term for a country with debt as high as Senegal's?
Yeah, what happens in that case, you get what you're calling a crowding out effect, okay? Basically, the government goes out into the marketplace and issues paper and basically sucks the money out of the economy in order to repay the debt. So they're crowding out the private sector, which then is unable to access that money for productive purposes. So the impact of that could be reduced economic growth and basically economic downturn, simply because local companies are no longer able to fund their working capital, which funds they were borrowing from the bank, which the funds are no longer there because the government has borrowed them in order to repay the debt. So those are the implications, and that will lead to other things. It can be inflationary. It can lead to to economic decline, unemployment, and all those terrible things that we don't want to happen.
So how does Senegal's case compare with other African countries that have gone through these restructuring programs or have been in debt relief in the recent years?
Now, Zambia seems to have successfully done that. We've got Chad, which is also restructured. You've got Kenya, you've got Ghana. Kenya might have to restructure. They haven't restructured yet. Ghana seems to be restructuring. But as I'm saying, you need to be comfortable with the amount of interference you're going to get, because effectively the IMF takes over. It says, listen, we're going to drive these things to make sure that you are able to repay this debt. Do you see what I'm saying? So the politics changes once you restructure, right? And then, you become beholden to IMF policy.
And I guess that's what every country is trying to avoid. You still want to maintain your autonomy, even though you may be heavily indebted. So there's clearly a difference there in priorities between the two countries. But I'm quite keen to find out what your thoughts are around issues of governance and transparency, given that the hidden or the previously undisclosed debts are said to have ballooned in the case of Senegal to the total figure over 11 billion now. What do you think are the measures that should be put in place in order to ensure transparency and to try and circumvent situations of this nature?
Yeah, it's bad news for the consumer, because let me tell you what, at the end of the day, it's the citizens who end up paying. It's the future generations who will end up with this debt. Okay, and the fact that the governments are not transparent with what exactly is owed is bad for the future of our children and bad for countries. Because imagine getting into government and only realizing you owe billions and you don't know what that money was spent for, but you owe billions, you'll be paying a lot of interest on that. It's bad news for anyone. That's why a lot of African governments are scared of power transition. the politics becomes very authoritarian and dictatorial because they don't want to, they can't afford to get out of power, because once they do, a new government might come in and expose all these things. So it leads to further political oppression and basically people hugging power and staying in power in order to remain in control. And it's basically, when the IMF comes and say political reforms, economic reforms, it sounds good on paper, but practically, political reforms are one major area that African leaders are scared of. And we've seen what is happening in Tanzania, we've seen what's happening in Somalia, we've seen what's happening all over Africa. It's the political side that is on the mess. And as long as the politics is wrong, the economics suffer, because economics is basically about political allocation of resources and management of resources. So political reforms are key. But the issue, there's no appetite. There's no appetite for that, because it would obviously expose a lot of things.
And which is what was happening here in the case of Senegal and the IMF. We thank you very much for your analysis this afternoon on this situation. You have yourself a splendid afternoon further.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. That's Vince Mosewe, an independent economist based in Zimbabwe. He takes us to exactly 4:30 p.m. Central African time. Let's head over now to the markets desk for the latest market indicators. And this afternoon, we've got Chanduko Ligege.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Thami, and good afternoon. $1 is trading at 17 Rand 29 in South Africa. In Botswana is at 13 Pula 31. Namibia 17 Namibian dollars 29. Zambia 22 Kwacha 64. Kenya, the dollar is 128 shilling 20. Ethiopia 153 birr 94. Uganda 3,000 shilling 479. Tanzania 2,000 shilling 454. $1 in Nigeria is 1,000 naira 435. Egypt is 47 Egyptian pound 30. Tunisia 2 dinar 94. Algeria 129 dinar 56. Morocco, the dollar will cost you 9 dirham 12. Angola, the dollar is at 912 kwanza. The Congolese franc is at 2,130. Commodities, gold is at $4,101. Platinum at $1,587 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil at $63.87 a barrel. That is all from me. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chanduko Ligege.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
And for the latest in the business of sport, a very good afternoon to you, Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you so much, Thami. A very good afternoon from the Sports Desk. So South Africa's Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture, Gayton McKenzie, has confirmed that an experienced project team will assist with the long-awaited introduction of the video assistant referee system in South Africa is already at work. So earlier on this year, McKenzie had announced that his department had committed $4.8 million toward the implementation of VAR in the Premier Soccer League. He also has now confirmed that the National Treasury $16 million for the current financial year to support the first phase on the rollout.
Treasury has approved initial spend of more than 20 million in this financial year. And we are confident that we will face VAR in using a sustainable, affordable approach that will see all our big games supported by VAR. And South Africans can already look forward to seeing VAR on the screens as we test.
Now, the Turkish prosecutor's office has ordered the detention of 21 individuals, including 17 football referees, as well as a Super League club president on charges of involvement in illegal betting, as well as match fixing. According to a statement by the Istanbul Chief Prosecutor's Office, the detained referees are accused of abusing their official positions, as well as intentionally influencing the outcome of matches. Among the other suspects are a former club owner, as well as a former sports association chairman, while an arrest warrant has been issued for another individual for spreading misleading information on social media. The arrests were conducted in 12 Turkish cities. The action also comes a week after the Turkish Football Federation announced it has suspended 149 referees and assistant referees for their involvement in betting. The federation's internal investigation also revealed that 371 of the country's 571 active referees in professional leagues have online betting accounts, with 152 actively participating in gambling. Well, Elina Rybakina won the biggest prize money payout in women's sporting history on Saturday following her spectacular championship run at the WTA finals in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. So after going undefeated across her 5 matches at this year's tournament, posting a perfect 3-0 record in the group stage, a semi-final victory over Jessica Pegula, and now a stunning win over Aryna Sabalenka, who's ranked world number 1, Rybakina has landed an unprecedented $5.235 million in prize money. Now, this landmark amount of prize money is also a record across both the men and women's professional tennis tours. She was asked about earning so much money, and this is what she had to say.
Well, it's definitely a huge amount, and honestly, I didn't think about any of that so much, but of course, it's great, and I don't know, we definitely need to celebrate really well with the team, family, and everyone.
All right, for now, the bad news, the reality of Texas contributions to her national federation, as well as other deductions, mean the net amount she will keep is significantly lower than the headline figure suggests. So despite the glamour as well as the global acclaim, insiders say that after federal as well as local taxation in the host country, plus a sizable cut owned by the Kazakhstan Tennis Federation, Rybakina could only see as much as $700,000 to $900,000 of a prize money effectively disappear. Rybakina's home country as well as the host country tax treaties add complexity and may also increase her tax bill. As part of her national team contract, the Kazakhstan Tennis Federation claims a portion of prize money earnings under a shared revenue agreement. Then professional athletes also have to face mandatory contributions to coaches, agents, union dues and tournament oversight fees, all eroding take-home money. Taken together, the financial reality is quite stark. While the trophy ceremony showed us a check of about $5.2 million, the actual personal profit may be closer to about $4.3 million or even less. And finally, there has been a huge surge of tickets purchased at next year's T20 World Cup in England following India's victory in the 50-over World Cup earlier on, just last month. So overall sales in this year's tournament, which runs then from the 12th of June until the 5th of July, have increased 171% compared to the previous week, with about 265% upturn in India fixtures. All the best-selling fixtures were India group stage matches, including a repeat of the World Cup against South Africa at Old Trafford on the 21st of June, and then they're meeting with Australia at Lord's Stadium on the 28th of June. Now, tournament director Beth Barrett-Wild said demand for tickets to next year's ICC Women's T20 World Cup in England as well as Wales has been incredibly high from the outset, propelled by a stellar World Cup win by India on their home turf in India a week and a half ago against South Africa. And that concludes your sports news this afternoon on Channel Africa. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, our email address is newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Remember as well to give us a call on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Mosibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Africa means business. Tune into Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni for the future of the African economy. Channel Africa, the African Perspective.
Thank you to Chanduko Ligege and Musibudi Makura. They bring us to exactly 4:40 Central African time as we turn our sights to Lesotho now. The Revenue Services in Lesotho, the RSL Board of Directors, has dismissed Commissioner General Advocate Matabo Mokoko for alleged incompetence, including failure to resolve mounting tax refund claims and to manage reputational risks. However, the dismissal has since been temporarily blocked by the Labour Court. This is pending the outcome of her challenge against the decision. It has been reported that Mokoko received her termination letter from the Revenue Services Board on Friday after allegedly failing to respond to a show cause letter issued a couple of days earlier on Tuesday. For more on this, we joined on the line by SABC News correspondent in Lesotho, Rapelang Hatebe. A very good afternoon to you, Rapelang. Good to be talking to you once again.
Hi, Thami. It's beautiful, rainy Lesotho day today. Good afternoon.
Beautiful and rainy. I tell you what, we've picked up on that weather and it's starting to rain in Johannesburg as well. But let's get back to the issue at hand. Can you just take us through this impasse between Advocate Matabo Mokoko and the Revenue Services Board of Directors in Lesotho? These allegations of incompetence, failure to resolve mounting tax refund claims and reputational risks, put that in context for us, please.
Indeed, it's quite a bit of a lengthy history if one could go. I think maybe starting with a bit of good news was that when the reforms started, the nation was quite upbeat and happy because for the first time, the Minister of Finance was a lady, the Auditor General was a lady, the head of the RSL, which is the tax board, was a woman. And it was that excitement to see women leading in positions of real influence. And now it looks like that relationship has gone south very quickly. I think the letter of show no cause or the board dismissing her was just a culmination of a few things that seemed like it would crash and burn this relationship. But we would understand that the only thing that would determine whether you fire the taxman is when she's not performing in terms of collection. And we only weigh that when the tax season comes. If she fails to meet the targets, this is the yardstick that can say she's not performing. But that has not ever been raised as an issue at any point in time. So we were yet to really get to the depth of what is it that can define her incompetence. But to give it a bit of a history, we know that she had a fall-off with her minister, with an allegation that the minister was seeking information which related to the tax matters because they could not meet each other at halfway. And she was adamant that she is not going to disclose the taxpayers' information. And I think this is where the culmination of the acronymous relationship started to take its course. Now, the board simply, I think, rubber-stamped the intention of what the finance minister felt that she was undermined if she was not supplied with the information that she was looking for. To jump very quickly, the letter is said to have been written. It's very vague. It does not really get into the meat of why she is considered not competitive. Safe to say, the mounting tax claim refunds, of which we say you can only make a determination at the end of the tax season. And this is where you can say, these are the facts, but nothing of that sort had been supplied.
There's also the saying that she failed to respond to that letter in time. What type of response was expected?
Look, a letter of show no cause usually is just the last step that says, look, this is just a formality, because usually when you get a letter of show no cause, the first thing you do is to try and seek legal advice. Your legal advice is the one usually who will advise you as to how to respond to the letter of show no cause. And sometimes they simply say, let them go ahead and do what they want to do, which I want to believe would have been the case. But ultimately, it could have been that they had already filed a notice to prevent the show of cause, of which, when that decision from the court came, they say the letter of firing had already been issued. So I think clearly it's semantics. You can tell that somebody clearly took the show of cause to court because she could not agree. And the board had said they had mutually agreed on a separation. So you can tell that clearly somebody is not telling us the real facts, because if we agreed on a separation, why would I have to go to court to dispute that claim?
And talking about court, the Labour Court has interdicted the dismissal. So does this mean that the Advocate Mukoko, is back at work, or is the board defiant in not having her back?
The board says by the time that Labour Court came, they had already fired her. So to the best of understanding is that she's no longer at service. But I think what we should know also is the comments that were made from Parliament, the Public Accounts Committee, from who is called the chair of chair. He seemed to come out guns blazing in defense of the fired tax lady. So I think this is where we need to understand that there's probably politics at play, and we simply can't ignore them. And as things stand, she is not an employee.
And what's the way forward?
The way forward will probably that the LRA, Revenue Services, which is now called RSL, would probably challenge the Labour Court's decision and oppose that decision. But as things stand, she will probably not step anywhere close to that door.
SABC News correspondent in Lesotho, Rapelang Radebe, thank you so much for that report.
Thami, thank you very much.
Have a great one. So there you have it, a stalemate, a court impasse. The Revenue Services Lesotho Board of Directors having dismissed Commissioner General Advocate Matabo Mokoko, and the Labour Court having temporarily blocked that move. But the Board of Directors not quite having a back, saying for them it's a fait accompli. But it is being discussed in Parliament, and we'll be keeping a very close eye on developments on that front. It has gone exactly 4:47.
Wake up with gratitude, hope, and the African spirit. Channel Africa, now easier to access than ever before. WhatsApp us on +27 63 406 9126. In business on Channel Africa.
So there is speculation that South Africa's Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana may formally announce a new inflation target at the upcoming medium-term budget policy statement. Recently, ratings agency Fitch said it expected the National Treasury to reveal the new inflation target, which the Reserve Bank would then have to implement. This follows the Reserve Bank's MPC interest rate announcement in July that it will target the bottom end of the 3 to 6% target range with immediate effect. Nompumelelo Siziba spoke to economic experts about the impact the current 3 to 6% target range has had on the South African economy, and where to next.
The 3 to 6% inflation target was introduced in the year 2000. Inflation targeting is used as a means to help anchor inflation expectations. High inflation erodes the value of a given currency, and so taming inflation is key for central banks to ensure that their currencies maintain good value and remain stable. Visiting professor at Wits University, Yanni Rousseau, says the current inflation target of 3 to 6% has served the local economy well.
The inflation target announced in 2000 served South Africa well. It has brought down both the inflation rate and inflation expectations to within the target range of 3 to 6%. Around 2001, there was an attempt to introduce a lower target rate of 3 to 5%, but that never materialized as a result of international financial uncertainty. So we've had the target range of 3 to 6% for this whole period.
Having the inflation targeting regime is said to have brought about a level of certainty and has been pivotal for all actors in the economy, especially for business players. Head of SA Macroeconomic Fixed Income and Currency Research at Standard Bank, Dr. Elna Moorman, explains.
So if I'm a business, I know that inflation will be somewhere between 3 and 6%, and I can plan around it, and I don't really have to worry about higher inflation. I know that over the long term, we may have some years that's slightly higher, but then we'll compensate for that and have years that are a little bit lower. And over the last couple of years in particular, the Reserve Bank went further to make it clear it wants 4.5%, the middle of that range. So it makes it even easier. I know that inflation should be 4.5%. I can plan according to that, etc. And so that's the big advantage, and that then makes it easier to invest and run your business, etc.
While the Reserve Bank firmly announced that it's now targeting the bottom end of the 3 to 6% inflation target range in July, technically the National Treasury is the one that's meant to formulate the inflation rate target with the help of the Reserve Bank's expertise and formally announce the policy target position. Professor Rousseau is advocating for another target range, albeit lower than the current one, and says it's important that there's alignment on the policy between the central bank and Treasury sooner rather than later.
I'm in favour of a 3% inflation target, but with a range of 1 percentage point on either side. So yes, the target is 3%, but 1 percentage point below and 1 percentage point above to give us 2 to 4%. And so I support the Reserve Bank targeting 3%. We need the government and the National Treasury to support this target. So my hope is that the Minister will announce the 3% target with a range around it in the upcoming MTBPS on the 12th of November. However, if the Minister does not announce this lower target, we can end up in the dangerous situation where the Reserve Bank targets inflation at 3% and the Treasury uses 4.5% as an inflation, call it, target or objective in their fiscal planning. And you can't have monetary policy heading towards a 3% target and fiscal policy working on a 4.5% target. That would be a very unsatisfactory outcome which South Africa cannot afford.
The formal inflation target range may or may not be announced on the 12th of November, but Dr. Moorman says what will be important is that there's buy-in from all sectors of society on whatever is decided.
It's unfortunately still very difficult to know whether he'll make the final call now or whether he'll just give us further guidance in terms of the Treasury's thoughts around the Reserve Bank's proposal for a point target of 3% and perhaps where he is with the negotiations with other stakeholders. Because what Treasury is emphasizing is that the more we have buy-in, the more everybody in the economy believes that this is going to happen, that this will be a good thing, that this is actually achievable, the easier it will be to actually achieve that on a sustainable basis.
Even if Godongwana doesn't announce the new inflation target range at the midterm budget this week, given joint assurances from both the Reserve Bank and National Treasury that the policy formulation work is done and dusted, and the importance of perceived policy alignment, the chances of an announcement soon, but at a later stage, appear high. Nompumelelo Siba, SABC News, Johannesburg.
African enterprise meets global opportunity. Africa in business on Channel Africa.
It is exactly 4:53 Central African time. So in this week's slot with First National Bank, we look at the latest job numbers coming out of South Africa. We'll also zoom into the great job creators. Who am I talking about? I'm talking about the mining and manufacturing sectors, as well as the data coming from those sectors. To talk to us more on this, we're joined on the line by Thanda Sithole, FNB Senior Economist. A very good Monday afternoon to you, Thanda.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm awesome. Thank you. Let's take a look at the latest job numbers. Those are coming out on Tuesday. What are your expectations?
So we don't think that we're going to see significant changes in the level of unemployment rate compared to what we have from quarter two. So at quarter two, the unemployment rate lifted to 33.2%. which reflected a 0.3 percentage points increase from quarter one. Given that GDP growth remains very subdued, we don't think that there's going to be significant changes in that number. So it will remain sticky around that level, requiring that we actually grow the economy much more significantly for it to come down a little bit. So yeah, we think that the level of unemployment will remain at that stage. And even the employment rate, the employment creation, if you look at quarter two, we added about 19.2 thousand jobs on a quarter-on-quarter basis. So that was not enough to completely reverse the 209,000 jobs that we lost in the first quarter. So yeah, I think just because growth remains in the low growth gear, it will be difficult for that number to move significantly lower.
Let's take a look then at the mining and manufacturing data. That is also out. Now, traditionally, these two industries do tend to be the great job creators, but not so much now, or at least less so than in the past. Let's start with manufacturing first. Your expectations around that.
Yeah, you are right. So if these sectors have also been experiencing challenges. On the manufacturing sector, we've got weak domestic demand and even external demand. Production remains weak. On a year-to-date basis, production is down in most categories or most divisions within the manufacturing sector. If you look at the manufacturing PMI indicator, it also fell to below 50 neutral mark, reflecting issues of weak domestic and external demand, but also even weak business activity and expectations of manufacturers over a near term also deteriorated, indicating that they are not even optimistic about near-term operating economic conditions. So yeah, we expect output there to remain subdued. There is usually some volatility in the data, but on a trend basis, I think year-to-date basis, manufacturing is down, and we think that for the year as whole, we are likely going to experience a contraction from that perspective. And then when it comes to the mining sector also experiencing challenges, also down on a year-to-date basis. And the biggest drag is around the PGMs. PGMs are still not doing well in terms of production, despite commodity prices having lifted a bit. Gold production also remains weak despite gold price at current levels. So yeah, there's still challenges. Of course, we also have logistics challenges, even though we are encouraged by the stabilization in ports and rail. But I think that there is still a lot of work that needs to be done to make sure that there is improvement in terms of logistics efficiency and all of that. And also, the external environment remains very weak. China is moderating. Our trading partner growth is not doing well. So yeah, I think over the near term, the two sectors are likely going to face increasing pressure.
Thanda Sithole, we'll leave it at that for this afternoon. Thank you so much for this afternoon's update.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's Thanda Sithole, FNB Senior Economist. And that's how we come to the end of our FNB Monday slot, but also the end of Africa in Business for today. And we say bonjour to Madame Voudefrique. Madame Voudefrique, Joël.
Bonjour,
good morning,
Thami.
good afternoon, bonjour.
Good afternoon. Bonjour à tous les auditeurs de Channel Africa sur Vue d'Afrique. Tout à l'heure, il sera question de l'ouverture officielle de la COP 30 au Brésil, avec la participation de 191 pays. Et aussi, nous parlerons du Gabon, où le procès de l'ancienne première dame Sylvia Bongo Dimba et de son fils Nourdine Bongo s'est ouvert également ce lundi à Libreville. Merci de rester connecté. C'est tout à l'heure sur Vue d'Afrique. Merci, Thami.
Merci beaucoup, Joël, and merci beaucoup to our team as well. Onelin Zinzi Chanduko Lugege and Musibudi Makura, as well as our production team, Mabubu Loka, Katu, and Talent. I'm Thami Ngubeni. You have yourself a splendid evening further, and restez connectés as Vue d'Afrique coming up with Les Joël in just a moment.